It is 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 8th of March, time for the regular Wenatchee School District Board meeting, which I now call to order and ask us all to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I welcome you all to this board meeting and thank you for joining us. Les doy a todos una bienvenida a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar. Gracias por su asistencia. The meeting is conducted in English, but we do have translation services so that citizen comment may be spoken in Spanish and be repeated in English. I will quickly describe this in Spanish. Si alguien quiere hacer su comentario de ciudadano o recibir explicaciones en español, tenemos disponible un servicio de traducción según pedido. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes for the meeting of the 22nd of February, vouchers and payroll, the personnel report, the surplus report, contracts, field trips, and second read policies that we previously looked at first reading. Is there any request to modify the consent agenda? If that is the case, I ask for motions to put forward the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Julie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Maria. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, I ask all of us to signify our vote by saying aye or nay if you want to later on, and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
That is passed unanimously. The next item is citizen comment, and I believe we have one citizen here to comment, okay? This is the time for the board to welcome and listen to public comment. Comments do need to be scheduled beforehand and have a 3-minute time limit. I will warn speakers when their time is about to expire, as it isn't easy to look behind you and see the clock. Welcome.
On February 9th of 2020, my daughter was physically assaulted by another senior student in the cafeteria of Wenatchee High School and ended up leading to bleeding and with a concussion. This evening, I am leaving you with a copy of the complaint file so you are aware of the details of the event. I am here this evening to bring a few important points to your attention. School safety, taking threats and harassment seriously, assisting injured students. School safety, with Wenatchee High School only having one lunch for 2,000 students, with staff members on security, it sets up the student body for huge safety concerns. The students need to know that they are safe when they enter school buildings and know that the staff members are there to protect them if needed. Please take the time to make a change in this area to keep all of our students at Wenatchee High School safe. Take threats and harassment seriously. We report threats and harassment from our students to the staff at Wenatchee High School. Our daughter was afraid and under lots of tension to go to school. Now, because she needs an education, we continue to encourage her to attend and always walk away from situations. The threats were not taken seriously, and my daughter ended up being assaulted at school, even school bleeding and with a concussion. Please take threats seriously. If you take them seriously, the students will take more time to think so their work and action. Assisting injured students. After the student was removed from the top of my daughter. My daughter ran outside bleeding. No teacher followed her outside to assist while she was outside bleeding, and obviously in shock and upset. And later we found out she had a concussion. It is imperative that we step up as adults and ensure our students are safe. No student should be outside the school after a physical attack without adult care. No ambulance call, no adult care. Again, we need to do better. I will be moving forward in holding the high school accountable for their lack of action. The lack of response and respect received from the administration of Wenatchee High School is unacceptable. Please recognize you have a huge problem. Please make steps to make a change. I am just one mom choosing to stand up. There are many more, as I have spoken with numerous mothers and the families lately. Take consideration by taking action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yolanda, for coming and telling us that. If you can get, yeah, thank you. The next item on the agenda under special presentations is the budget update.
Tonight, Jeanette Jeffress will be joining us, our Executive Director of Finance and Operations, to walk through the first part of the budget. Jeanette, the floor is yours.
Okay. Wait for a second for the presentation to get up. I don't know where to look anymore with all this technology. Ron keeps changing it all around. Thank you. Okay, so we're here today to go through the first part of the budget. So I'm going to kind of phase this in over the next several months because the budget is a pretty much year-round process, it feels like now. So just really taking it one step at a time so you guys really can understand the work that goes behind it and the why that's behind it as well. So we will take it one step at a time. Okay, so really the bottom line is the budget is a value statement. I think we all know that, but it's one thing to say it and that's another thing to do it. And it is a very, very large kind of ship to turn around to really make our budget a value statement. And as you guys know, we're working through the strategic planning process and lots of other things to align our district with best practices in the industry. And the budget needs to follow that. And we're working on that. And I think this year I'm pretty pleased with the step forward that we've made in that investment. So just here we have our promise statement, our big six, our values and our priorities as well. Really, the budget just flows through all of it, but big key point is the partnership piece. And to me, it really is being a partner to our district. So my office being a partner to all the buildings and departments and having that open door conversation to ensure that we're really using our funds in the best way possible for kids and for our district and for our community as well. So, you know, it really is not just about, you know, kids. We are really a big environment and a big part of the community as well. So this is the timeline. So as you guys can see, there's a hope you don't get sick of me because I'm going to be up here like almost every board meeting for the next several months. So today we're going to focus on the fund balance projections, the early projections, enrollment estimates, and staffing. And then next meeting, I will come with some information on the legislative session. They are supposed to finish their budget work. I mean, behind closed doors, it might be done today, but the end of this week, we should have some good information. So at the next board meeting, I'll bring forward what I have. And then early April, we're going to do a board workshop that's based on the strategic plan and implementation, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well. And then April, the end of April, we'll again go through enrollment, a little bit deeper dive, and enrollment drives revenue. So we're going to talk about that, and staffing update, because I think, as you guys all know, budgets are living, breathing documents. They aren't stagnant. And so over the next several months, we'll be going through some modifications and just, really gearing up for that fall start. Then in May, we will have a whole budget workshop together, go through all the funds and the 5-year projections. So that's going to be a pretty beefy one. So we'll gear up for that. And then the end of June, again, just any updates before we submit it to the ESD, the Educational Service District, North Central ESD, to review. And then eventually that gets to OSPI. And then in July, it's available for the public upon request. And August, we will have our public hearing along with any summary and changes. And then the end of August, we'll do an adoption, and that will be at the regular board meeting. We're going to jump right into it. Fund balance projections. So I apologize that this is a little bit small, but I wanted to try to get all of it on one slide. And this is actually not the first time that you guys have seen this slide. This is the same slide that I had in the year-end presentation. And so really it's focusing on, see if I can use this fancy thing. Hey, look at that. So really it's focusing on the projected. So what was projected to be our ending balance at the end of last school year, and then what was our actual balance at the end of last school year. So you guys will probably remember a few months ago, I came and presented the year end and let you guys know that we ended up with a surplus of about $3.3 million. And so that is what this slide is showing, is where we thought we were going to end up is not as bad as where we actually ended up. Is there any questions on this slide? We're going to take this kind of slide by slide from here on out. So there's a lot of numbers and a lot of detail, and I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable with kind of where we're going and what you guys are seeing. And I know Catherine's new, and not everyone understands school finance, and I realize that. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, so this is my projection for the current year we're in. So taking it kind of back to present day. So the 21-22 budget column, so that right there is literally the budget that was adopted last summer. So that is the beginning balance and the ending balance from the budget. So again, as you guys know, budgets are fluid and constantly changing. And so if you look to the next column, you will see what I am projecting for our actual balances to be. So again, there's that 14.8 million, which is from the previous slide. So that's the last year's ending balance, which became our this year's starting balance. And then my projection where we will end is about $12 million. So both of those columns, if you look at the bottom where you see the negative red number that looks a little scary, you notice that both of those negative red numbers are really pretty close together. They're only about $26,000 apart. So what that tells us is essentially the amount that we were planning and knew that we might reduce in fund balance is probably potentially actually going to be the true reduction in fund balance this year. So we aren't going to reduce more in fund balance just because we had more money. So we didn't say, oh, yay, we have an extra $3 million. We're going to spend it. We're spending what we planned to spend initially. So there's that. I'm going to stop.
That didn't quite make sense to me.
Okay.
The fund balance is ending up essentially exactly where we predicted it to be, yet we got more money. So you're saying, yay, we didn't spend more money?
So
Doesn't make sense to me.
So in the budget, right, we planned to spend down our fund balance by about $2.8 million.
I get that.
And while, yes, it would have been nice to be able to kind of keep that $3 million that we had extra over here, or I guess I shouldn't say extra, but more than what we had thought we were going to start with, it would have been nice to be able to, set that aside and not touch it and add to our fund balance, because that's kind of what would have happened if we would have taken the $3 million that we had in extra fund balance that we weren't planning. That's bigger than that negative red number, right? So ideally, it would have been nice to not spend down our fund balance. I'm going to stop because I feel like I'm
Yeah.
not
think
answering your
I think you
question.
just misspoke a little bit the first time you said it, because we did spend the additional money that we got. And we ended up in the same place where we predicted that we were going to be.
So
Because
as far as the amount that we spent down in our fund balance, that is correct. We are spending down as much as we thought we would, dollar for dollar. But we aren't at 8.6.
Yeah, I was going to say we have revenues, expenses, and ending fund balances. So the way I interpret that slide is the revenues and expenses were very similar to what we had predicted with a deficit of 2.8 million. And so that part's the same. The fund balance, which was 3 million more than we expected at the beginning of the year, remains 3 million more than we would have projected normally with revenues and expenses.
Correct.
Right.
gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
It does take a village. So that point that Martin just made is also shown here in the difference. So you see the beginning balance had a difference of about 3.3 and the ending balance has a difference of about 3.3 million. So essentially, what that means is that when we were looking at that 4-year budget last year and we thought, oh boy, our fund balance is going to be decreasing, we probably need to start reducing staff. That was the big takeaway last year, right? So one of the good things about this is now, it gives us a little bit more time to be able to do that slowly and not so much a rip the Band-Aid effect that could be a little painful. So essentially what we're able to do is make that slow phase in, which we'll talk about in a second. So that's the good news of it.
Real quick question then, that mean that this 9.6% fund balance is kind of artificially high and will be tapered off in the next couple years?
Well, I wouldn't say it's artificially high because again, this is a snapshot, right? So this is just looking at this school year. So yeah, every year is going to be different. You know, once we find out what the legislature is going to do and going to plan for next year, then that's going to change potentially what things look like. And so, you know, this is my projection as of right now. You know, every day things change. And so I will be doing another revision as we get a little bit closer to the actual budget, just to make sure we're still in a good place. And we're still on track with what I was projecting. So another component of fund balance is what type of funds and what restrictions on our funds do we have? So we have different categories of fund balance. So basically different buckets that have different restrictions on our funds. So the first one is restricted for carryover. And so essentially we have state grants that provide us funds and we can carry some of those funds over, but we have to keep the intent and purpose of those funds and spend them in that way. So that's what the first one is. The second one is very similar. It's just for the skill center. So it's for the tech center out in Old Station. And that is for their carryover, and all of their revenue and expenses go through that bucket. We also have to set aside inventory funds to offset that. We have grants and donations and other things that we need to keep intact for their intent and purpose. So we keep track of those and the assigned to other purposes. And then we're going to skip down to the unassigned to minimum fund balance policy. So that is the 5% that the board currently has in policy 6022 for it's 5% of current year expenditures. And then the rest of the fund balance goes into just the general unassigned. So the next thing we'll look at is enrollment. So at this point, the enrollment projection is based on the November 2021 counts. And looking at our history, that's a pretty close month. The last several years with the pandemic has definitely thrown normal out the window. But I believe that we will be likely close to, using that as a good benchmark. Our enrollment hasn't changed that much since then on an aggregate. But we will continue to monitor. We look at enrollment every month. And then also looking at that 5-year cohort survival. So as each grade transitions down, looking at how many students actually stayed with us from that grade level, or that class of students, I guess is how you could frame that. So then also looking at birth rate information, that's a little bit of a slow process. Now the data is a little bit harder to find. So working on that. Also looking at the Pinnacles Prep enrollment impacts like we did last year. So we hopefully will know that within the next month or so. And then also continued expansion of the CTE, which is career technical education offerings at all our middle schools and Wenatchee High School, and a few at Westside High School as well. And then again, looking at WIA and what does that long-term look like for our district. So we're looking at 21-22 and 22-23 enrollment projections in two different modes here. Basically, we are looking at on this side is by grade level, and then on this side is by building. So we have a few interesting things that are happening within the district. So we had several years of large classes come through that are in the 500s. And those classes are now rolling through mostly our secondaries. And so our elementaries are decreasing a little bit. And then layering on top of that, also Pinnacle's prep opening and adding additional grades, which is now going to be impacting us at the 6th grade level for the next several years. So there's a few things kind of going on, but it will be interesting just with the pandemic, how birth rates change and how that might impact our kindergarten classes in the future and things like that. Also looking at expansion of other programs and offerings that are a benefit to students. So these enrollment counts for the 22-23 school year were what we used to look at our staffing and to roll out our staffing units model, which we'll talk about in a second. But before I jump ahead, does anyone have questions on the enrollment piece? And also before I forget, this is only basic ed and CTE enrollment at this point. In the next presentation, we'll go through all the other different categories of enrollment as well. Okay. Staffing, which is the biggest piece of the pie here. So really, our goal is to become a highly effective education system. And the way we feel like we will achieve that is by using multi-tier systems of support. MTSS is our common acronym around here. So really that focus is on strengthening tier 1 instruction, often referred to as the core level of instruction, and creating consistency in our intervention system, increasing inclusionary practices for SPED, ELL, and LAP students. So all students really experiencing that inclusive instruction. Looking and using our PLCs, making sure that everyone's getting collaborative feedback, and also continued implementing SEL curriculum and PBIS as well. So this is really going to be a huge focus of the board workshop that's coming up that I talked about in the timeline. So we'll dive a lot deeper into this then and talk about how the budget is a way to support this work. So last year I talked a little bit about the staffing model and kind of the plans for rolling that out. So we rolled that out this year, and we went through a fairly reflective process with doing that. So I researched some other models in Washington that were available. There's not a lot of schools that do that, that do models that are publicized and publicly available. So looking at the research that was available, working through different models with our specific data and our specific classes. Also working with cabinet, working with Kelly and HR, really making sure we understood building schedules, impacts to staffing changes, those types of things. And then finalizing that model and then meeting with principals to discuss the staffing impacts. So we'll start with the elementaries. They're probably the easiest ones to understand, at least for me. So elementary staffing was really focused more on a target district average student FTE. So that's how we allocated the staffing units. And the biggest reason why we used that type of model is because that is how the state provides us staffing units for K-3 class size. And so to have something that's on the same playing field for the whole elementary building, we had to include things like specialists. So the Palm specialist is what we refer to them as. PE, art, library, music. So those specialists were included in the class size, the teaching units that were allocated out to buildings. Schools were also loose term grouped. They weren't like really grouped, but we looked at them as a collective based on their free and reduced percentages. And so we were able to make sure, Washington, Sunny Slope, and Newberry, they are the least impoverished schools. And so we looked at them together to make sure, do they seem reasonable? Obviously, we can't get everyone to the exact same number. That's just not possible. But is it reasonable? Is it within a range that seems like it's, fair and equitable? Mission View and Lincoln were grouped together, and then Lewis and Clark and Columbia were also grouped together. So we didn't just look at student FTE, even though student FTE is what drives our funding. We also looked at body counts because our contract language with our certified staff is all based on body counts. So we wanted to make sure we're looking at that. We don't want to make sure we're not putting 30 kids in a classroom without at least knowing that we're putting 30 kids in a classroom, that kind of thing, which we didn't do, but you get what I mean. So just really making sure we're looking at the whole picture and trying to make sure that we understand what impacts we're making when we're talking about staffing. So any questions on the elementary staffing model?
I have a question. I understand from the principals this year that the free and reduced lunch percentages they really kind of weren't accurate. They weren't able to do them because everybody's gotten the free lunch, so that it skewed their measurements because people didn't fill out the information because all the lunches were free. So did you take that into account or maybe look at it from the previous years? Is that how you determine the number or?
So we looked at it, and realistically, our schools' free and reduced counts don't change, dramatically. It's not necessarily going to change a school from 25 to 50%. They might go 25 to 30, maybe 35. So while yes, our data is likely a little bit behind because of what you just stated, it's difficult to know, is that really going to change them that much? And we don't know what next year will look like either. We don't know if all students are going to get a free meal, if we're going to have paid, if they are paid, now the high school qualifies. So there's a lot of questions.
That was kind of my next question. You don't know yet what's going to happen with free meals next year, if that's
No.
going to be a thing. And does that have to do with ESSER funds too? Was that where that came from or?
No, so the rule of free meals or not free meals is a federal rule. So that will come from the federal government, but it doesn't necessarily connect to the ESSER program. They're different programs. It's ran through the Department of Agriculture as the food service program. So hopefully.
I have a quick question on that. I have read that the problem was not that the school district did not ask for that information, but that it wasn't necessary and therefore it was very difficult to get 100% response. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
So therefore you had somewhat flawed information for the current year, which you could compare to previous years
Mhm.
and make a reasonable estimate.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, there's a lot of different layers within the food service and free and reduced lunch process, which is probably a whole nother workshop, honestly, which, that's enthralling information. But, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And so there is, this baseline that we can, kind of reasonably count on essentially, but Really, those free and reduced actual applications do cover a good amount of our student body. So without those, it is kind of challenging. So what does that mean for our elementary schools? So overall, not a ton of impact when you look at the whole staffing picture, correct? So looking at Sunny Slope, they have a couple grade levels that are a little smaller. And so we reduced 2 staff members there, but also acknowledging there is a lot of development going on around Sunny Slope Elementary. So we acknowledge that we need to keep an eye on it. The principal acknowledges it. We acknowledge it as a cabinet level. We need to make sure that we're watching that. And as things actually finish and families are moving in and that kind of thing, really constantly monitoring our enrollment in that school. Mission View has the same thing. They have a few grade levels that are slightly smaller. They were actually fairly impacted by those higher classes of 500 plus rolling out. They were pretty impacted by that as far as enrollment goes. So they reduced 3 staff in their classes, and then Lewis and Clark were reduced 1. So one of the things that actually allowed us to do is expand our transitional kindergarten program. So we have currently 1 transitional kindergarten program at Columbia, and they have been doing fantastic. Sai is very happy with the program there. So we have been able to expand that program for the next year. We are adding 1 transitional kindergarten class at Mission View. And then we are adding 1 at Columbia as well. So Columbia will have 2. So that'll be a good change for the district, I think, and a good change for the community. So, being able to, bring some new enrollment into the district as well. Okay. Also, the model is not perfect. Our class sizes don't fit exactly into a perfect square that makes it easy to determine what staffing levels are needed. So there are certain grade levels at certain schools that we will be watching really closely throughout the rest of this year and into the fall to make sure they're staffed appropriately.
Can I just ask a question about the transitional kindergarten? Why 2 at Columbia versus branching out to another potential elementary school?
So a couple of reasons. Columbia has an established program, so that teacher would have a partner within their building. Columbia also has a pretty high need. I actually just talked to the principal today, and he's pretty much filled the 2nd class already. And Columbia is a good central location. That, like I said, those teachers are able to collaborate collectively, and he has space. That's another thing. Space is a premium, and they are actually able to utilize one classroom to do some center work and that kind of thing. So both TK, that's what I'm calling TK classes, are able to use one space for different things. Okay, moving right along. Secondary staffing. So the secondaries operate vastly different than the elementaries. They're vastly more complicated. And I feel like when I know them, I learn something new every time I talk to a principal. So staffing units are generated for the secondaries based on 24 students per class in the middle school and 26 students per class for the high schools. We also looked at each building's building schedule and how many periods in a day they operate. And that was the biggest driver to determine how many staffing units they were allocated. So example, Orchard operates a different building schedule than Pioneer and Foothills do. And so Orchard's staffing was built based on their building schedule, not based on, Pioneers or Foothills. So bottom line, middle schools were within plus or minus one of the funded staffing units. So we made the decision to not make any changes to their staffing this year. If they were within maybe 2 or 3, that might have been a different conversation, but within plus or minus 1, removing 1 really, really impacts their building schedules and would be a large change for them. West Side also was not changed just due to the unique nature of their program offerings and our continued learning about that. There is conversations about class sizes and different course offerings for next year. So we're excited about that. Wenatchee High School, they were approved, as you guys know, for a junior ROTC program, which we're really excited about. So that's actually going to bring 2 new instructors to the campus, and they will be basically sharing a class. So they will be co-teaching those classes. And then in addition to that, CTE was also approved for an additional FTE for ASL, so American Sign Language. So they will be adding that to their program offerings. And they were also approved for a CTE coordinator to support their expansion in their courses and their staffing. And that was all verified just looking at what was the increased enrollment, what revenue is generated from that, and making sure that that's a self-sustaining operation. Any questions on the secondary?
Question just in general,
Mhm.
did we have overload costs this year? Classroom overload?
Yes, we did have some overload cost. We also had some prep coverage and that kind of thing on an ongoing basis, just due to the fact that sometimes we weren't able to fill positions. And so the high school specifically had one position that they weren't able to fill. And so they chose to essentially fill that internally with staff covering during their prep periods. And that one staff person not being able to be filled it did create some overload in some areas.
Was that just at the high school?
The high school is the one that sticks out to me the most. There was probably some overload in some other buildings, but not as much. Those are good questions though. The high school did post that position, so hopefully we'll get it filled next year. Okay, looking at classified staff. So at the elementaries, like I said, those TK classes, they will need some para support. So there will be probably 1 to 2 para educators per class, just depending on student need and special ed, IEP services, those kinds of things. The middle schools with expanded CTE offerings, they were adding 1 to 2 paras per middle school to support the expanded work in those areas. We're doing the same type of thing at the high school. We're adding up to 3 paras for the high school for CTE courses and supporting those in that area. And then also some technology support, additional hours that we actually already hired this year because there was funding available within those programs. So we moved forward with that. And then operational support, district level support. Again, you guys already know we made this move already, but it's a change for next year's budget, looking at last year's budget. the safety security coordinator position. And that is the last of the staffing. So any other questions on staffing? Okay. So again, just the budget timeline. So the next thing I will come with is the legislative session. So we'll look at the impacts of that. And then the next board workshop will be on the strategic plan implementation. And then at the end of April, we'll come back together to dive into enrollment, revenue, and staffing again. So again, I'll have that preliminary revenue available, finalized as much as possible, staffing plans, and again, that enrollment analysis. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but there's a lot of work ahead of us. And so I do want to make a few comments on focus. I think it's really good to see a clear line from the strategic priorities into the budget, and I'm glad to see that. And then recognizing that about 85% of our costs are people, I think it makes a lot of sense to really focus on efficient allocation of people, obviously within the constraints that we're given. The next thing is we recognize the uncertainty. You'll be giving a legislative update, which will drive a lot of the revenue shortly. And at the next board meeting, you'll be also giving us an asset update on carryover from the COVID money. So, those are areas that we still need to tie down. But having said that, I'm very anxious to see a rigorous high-level detail on the contents of the expenses and revenues and the planning as soon as you're able to get there. And I recognize the budget workshop scheduled for May the 24th, so that's good. But I want to make a comment that the board is responsible for approving the budget. But also, as we get to the workshop, in an ideal world, there is healthy interaction between a board who can bring in a certain amount of outside insight and perspective, and that in a timely way, so that it fits in the process, we can all put our heads together. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I wanted to say. I think thank you for starting that, but nobody can relax.
I will definitely not be relaxing for the next several months.
Thanks, Jeanette. At this point, we move on to board communication for those board members who have things to say.
Go in this order again. So I just wanted to just real quickly say that I really appreciated the opportunity to get to visit the middle schools for the PLC in action kind of workshop. I went to Pioneer last week, and it was an absolute privilege to see these teachers working so well together on, it was like a model from the workshop that we did. So it was fantastic. The principal was great. He's truly adopted this at his level and really breathes it into the staff. And so that was really great to see. The other piece is just the ledge update. The session's wrapping up in 2 days. It was a short session. So just a few of the bills that we were kind of looking at, the enrollment funding stabilization looks like it'll probably pass. It passed the House, and I presume will be hitting the Senate floor in the next 2 days and delivered to the governor. Funding for additional support for SEL. So I'm sure Jeanette will be updating us on what that does to our budget as these go through, but it looks like a little bit of additional funding may be coming through for social emotional support personnel. Prejudgment interest was one that wasn't really on my radar right away, but there's going to likely be a change now. Typically, prejudgment interest, if you were sued, would run from the date your claim was filed in court. Now there's, and I believe it's been approved or it's passed for third reading, but it will now allow prejudgment interest to accrue on torts that from the day they occur. So this could lengthen your interest accrual period for 2 to 3 years, depending on the nature of the claim. So that's just hopefully we don't get sued all that much because we are watching for the safety and being cautious, but that was just one that kind of caught me because of my legal background. The bonds needing simple majority approval, I was hopeful that this would go through, but it looks like it died in committee. And same with the Hawkins's consolidation bill. It didn't really impact us, but it was interesting to see one from a local. It got good support, but I think it also died in committee. So just a few of the interesting ones, but Jeanette will, I'm sure, update us more in depth next week.
Okay. I just want to echo what Julie said about the opportunity we had to go visit, watch some PLC. I was fortunate to attend Pioneer with Julie, and everything she said is spot on. It gave us a little bit of a glimpse of the work teachers do during PLCs, but also the students they're serving, how unique they are to each school. I was also fortunate to go to Orchard and just seeing the differences between those two middle schools. It was fascinating. So kudos to all our teachers in our buildings, the hard work that all the time and effort they're investing in our kids. And also to our principals. I think they often go unnoticed. They are the leaders of our buildings. And just, they're not only, their main focus is our students, the academic achievement, rallying their staff and parents. So yeah, just big kudos to the work they're doing with PLCs and also outside of PLC. In regards to Ledge Committee, I think Julie just mentioned it all. I'll be meeting with Marissa Rathburn towards the end of the month, who is the head of the district legislative committee. So she's going to be in town, so I'll be meeting up with her. And then in April, there'll be a conference in Pasco for the district legislative reps that I will be attending in person. So that's for me.
Yeah, I want to echo the two of you and saying Catherine and I were able to go to Foothills and observe the sixth grade PLC in action. And I think we were both very favorably impressed. It's heartening to see in action teachers really focusing on individual students and truly collaborating, knowing every student in their collective group and focusing on their well-being as well as their academic needs. And they were super enthusiastic to have that opportunity to participate in that work. And they were gung-ho about PLC. So that was really great to see.
I'm not going to echo because everybody echoed already. But one of the things that stood out to me is we met with Principal Govea. And when I went to my school visit there, he said in 38 years of teaching, this has been the most life-changing thing for education was the PLC. So that's very exciting to hear from him. But before we went in, Laura asked, are these teachers bought in on this? We met with the principal and Alyssa, who was amazing. Yeah, MTSS coach, yeah. And so Laura asked that question after we met with the teachers or when we were meeting with the teachers, and 3 of the teachers teared up because they are so bought in. And that really just drove it home that they are so excited about it. They see the difference it's making, and that is really exciting for us. So yeah, it was fantastic.
And it was all great, but I'm going to change to a different kind of shout out. And I've actually got 3 of them, and 2 of them are repeat awards or repeat culprits, if you like that. The sports medicine program at the high school, once again, has representation at a national conference. And this is one of the excellent longstanding CTE programs in the high school. And once again, robotics, which is not only done at Foothills, but Foothills is the school that seems to have grabbed that and once again have teams competing at nationals and really excelling. So those 2 are pretty amazing. But actually the 3rd one is a new one, and in a way it most excites me. The technology department operates, is a sponsoring agency for an apprenticeship program. It's supervised by LNI in the state, and a student will work for 2,000 hours and at the end qualifies as a journeyman. And so two things happened. The program here was recognized as being exceptional and will be presented that way. And also the very first employee in the school district who's come through that apprenticeship program, whose name is Noah Olson. Congratulations to him. And he's joined the department. So I think that this kind of expansion of the breadth of education is something very exciting to see. And I congratulate everybody who's involved. And thanks, Ron.
That was all very heartening to hear, and for the board to know that there's going to be more PLC opportunities for you to be able to engage with at all three levels. So be looking in your email. Hopefully I'll have something out later this week with some different dates and times, or from Kim. Be looking for that. But they really do appreciate our board being in schools and seeing what staff are doing on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that. And I know it's a big commitment of your time coming in to see it, but our staff absolutely value the board being in the buildings, speaking with board members, telling their story. And also Maria, for highlighting, and all the other board members highlighting the work of our principals. This work gets accomplished through great leadership at the building level. Today, through our WASA PLC collaborative effort that the board supported about a year ago, we had Janelle Keene in here in our boardroom with all of our leaders, principals, APs, coaches, cabinet members in here this throughout the morning, really working through the PLC process, honing in on what are we currently doing and where are next steps forward to continue getting better. Even at some of these amazing sites that you saw, we can continue getting better for our students. More students learning more information. That's the whole goal. We continue to grow. We continue to grow. So I want you to be looking for that. And just as I believe everyone knows, Saturday is the end of the mask mandate regarding the schools. It is school, it is family and student choice, 100%. Whatever that choice is that a family or a student makes, that's where we're going to be at, with the respect and compassion for each of those decisions made throughout our organization. It is not a choice of any staff member for a class or anybody to wear or not to wear. This is all about an individual choice for our students and their families, and staff members as well. I'm going to be really clear with that. Staff have those same choices to make. And we're going to be incredibly caring and compassionate for each person for whatever choice they make, without worrying about why they made that choice. Board members will be the same. People will make choices about if they want to wear the mask or not. But we're really preaching the care and compassion for each person as they make these decisions. But on Monday, March 14th, that will be in effect in our schools throughout our district, throughout, I believe, the entire state, unless other school districts are making different decisions. But that's where we're at in WSD. So looking forward to next week. All right, that's it for me.
Martin, may I ask a question? I'm sorry. And again, being new, I'm not sure procedurally how this is to work. Maybe I should have said this in communication. I'm curious to know where we're at. I know as a board, we've spoken about town hall meetings and making that happen. Curious to know where we're at with that, if those that plan is in process and what that plan would look like.
Yeah, so great question. Diana and I, the communication director, we've met a couple times on this topic around the when, the where. We're going to have our first one in mid-April around the equity review. We'll be putting that date out. And then after that, we'll also engage more with the board, the community conversations. Board members may remember this way back when, pre-COVID, we did some of these pieces where board members are engaging with the community, because one of the things we'll be very cognizant of is to make sure that it's it's an appropriately open meeting act. So generally, we had 2 board members attend one of those community conversations. So yes, we're in the works of that. We'll be putting that in the weekly update either this week or next week. Yep.
Just to follow up on the mask mandate being lifted. So will the district be doing some sort of communication weekly? I'm pretty involved in it because of my workplace. But in regards to the mitigation strategies, they're now recommended versus required, and then testing. So I think, well, I'll let you, because I'm sure there's a plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have, again, Diana will be rolling out communication. Started last week. We'll continue sending out communication to our families and our students around the choice that families and students need to make. The Department of Health just today, earlier this morning, mid-afternoon, released their new guidelines. Tomorrow as cabinet, we'll be reviewing those. But I don't think there's anything earth-shattering in them, or I would have heard from other superintendents. I just didn't have the time today to be able to dig into it. So we'll look through that as cabinet team tomorrow to pull it apart and see if there's something in there that we'll make sure that we communicate out to our community and definitely to the board as well.
That is, okay, then the school board will now recess into executive session for a period of 30 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. Pursuant to District Policy Number 1410 and RCW 42.30.110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. The executive session is extended for an additional 20 minutes.